This is the Foxhole Podcast.
Adib, welcome to the Foxhole Podcast. It's a great pleasure to have you here. I'm super excited for the audience to hear your journey and your story and how you got where you are and just all the nooks and crannies that you went into and came back out of to move up, and then your vision for where you're going to be in the future. I'm also excited to hear about your take on basketball, youth basketball, and input you have for young basketball players who are in the process of developing to get to a place where they can move beyond high school. So without further ado, I'd love for you to make just a brief introduction of yourself. Really, I think would be helpful to know is like, your high school career, what you did there, moving into college. I know you were heavily involved in student leadership as well, that sort of component. And then I know you did an internship, maybe a little bit about that internship and what you're doing now in terms of basketball.
Yeah, so first of all, Coach, thank you for the opportunity to come out here and allow me to share my story and my testimony. I am from Spartanburg, South Carolina, born and raised in a small town. It's not even as small as it used to be. It's grown exponentially. I went to Dorman High School, was not the best player there. Tried my best to try to make my way into college, but, I learned that I am a lot better as a coach than I am as a player really early. And I decided to embrace that. And I was working and training kids at the age of 17, 18 years old, kids my age, and just developing a clientele list from that. And then I went into college as a student manager at USC Upstate in 2019 through 2021. And, I had the opportunity and the great privilege to serve as a student body president of my senior year at Upstate, which opened up a lot of doors for me as well. And then after Upstate, I had the opportunity to have some time to work with Baylor University with their men's basketball program and just kind of see how they do things on a day-to-day basis, learn the next level of player development. I had an opportunity to work with young kids and high school kids, and then making that jump from college and then high-level D1 was a great experience. And I'm currently right now at Spartanburg Methodist College as an assistant coach. And I am first and foremost a man of God, a man of faith. That's what I try to stand my rock on. And then my family is so important to me as well. And then my third value is my craft. I try to be a sponge in every aspect of it, and I try to do the best I can to lead and coach the players that I'm around. So thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is where you're at currently in your role. If you think about maybe young athletes hearing this, right? They're high school, middle school kids, high school kids, thinking about going to the next level. What are the types of things that you're seeing in these athletes that are coming that they could improve on to get to when they arrive at your doorstep? What are the things that they're lacking now that they could do to kind of bridge the gap to be ready when they land on your doorstep?
So, I'm really privileged to work with a great coach, Nori Johnson at Spartanburg Methodist College, who's the head coach, who's my boss right now. And he's amazing. And he's set up a great class that has came in this upcoming year. And the one thing that I've noticed about all the players is that one thing that I've noticed even at Baylor and at Upstate is the guys that are good people at heart will eventually, it'll just translate over a lot smoother. So, obviously the thing that gets you in the door is your talent, but in order to maintain your growth and just a positive trajectory as a player, you have to first and foremost be a good person, because I promise you this, no coach and no player and even an administrator at the athletic director or your principal or whatever doesn't like dealing with a player that brings just excess to the table. For example, just like if you have bad character outside the classroom, and if you're not a good friend / teammate on the court, just being a good person is extremely important to be a part of a team, especially at the next level, because let's say, for example, you get to the college level and you're blessed to play at that level. When you get to that level, the next stage is to become a pro. And those habits that you learn at the college level, you embrace, and then you try to take that over to the professional level as well. So don't don't think of it as something that you're just doing for the time being. Oh, I'm just here, I'm here. It's embracing where you are right now in the moment, learning from it, and taking those lessons into the next stage of where you are.
Of those characteristics, when you said being a good teammate, being a good person, like, can you be a little more specific about what that means when colleges are looking for players or looking at players? Are they checking their social media and going, hey, these are the kinds of things this person's posting? Maybe they're volunteering or they're helping out people, or like, what are the kinds of things?
100%. It's so funny you say that because I was talking to a buddy of mine, and in basketball, coaches' jobs are two things. One, to prepare for the guys that they got right now, and to prepare for the guys that they're trying to get to come in. And if you're looking at the guys that they're trying to bring in, there's not a thing that these coaches don't know about you. And I promise you that. If it's on social, I mean, things are so accessible these days that a coach can just look up your Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, even like any type of social media, and just find out what kind of person you are and make a judgment through that. So I think it's really important to have a good face and a good name through that as well. So coaches, when they do their research and do their due diligence to find out what kind of person you are, because you already got your foot in the door because of your skill set. You got to remember that you have to be good enough to play at the college level. But then once you get past that, what's next, right? And then that's where the check boxes come in, like you were saying, that, okay, is he posting crazy things on social media? What type of guy is he? What references can I get from him? What other coaches in the area know about this player, and what kind of things do they say about him as well? So the digging and the intel that coaches gather about future recruits is really important, and it's important that players understand that aspect as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it as you were talking about that, it reminds me of, typically in the summers and throughout the year, I'll attend point guard college training. Either it's a camp or week-long camps or overnight camps or whatever it happens to be. And typically speaking, the basket coaches that are there, so the people that are working those camps, those coaches, they're either playing at a school or coaching at a school. And so it's interesting because you have all these athletes show up there that want to learn, but they fail to recognize that the people that are there teaching are the coaches in the places that they're trying to get to. And then they show up sometimes with behavior that's not maybe in line with the values of that
Mm-hmm.
university or college, right? So PGC is interesting because there's a lot of court time, but there's also a lot of classroom time. They put you in a classroom setting, you learn to study film, you learn how to read film, you learn just leadership skills. And a lot of players, they want to be on the court, but when it comes time to the classroom, it's the last place they want to be, right? And
Exactly.
I try to get through to these young athletes, whether I'm like, you never know who's here, who's watching you. This coach that's running a basket coach here today is the place you want to get to. And so you're making an impression on that person while you're here.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that happens is it's a small community, right? This is relatively,
Exactly.
so it's easy to call something. You put on your resume, hey, I attended this particular camp. It's easy for a coach to call, someone who was at the camp. Hey, do you remember this kid? Yeah, of course I remember that.
Exactly. Exactly.
It gets at that point you were saying that it's just good to be a good person
Mm-hmm.
in
Well,
all
and because
your life.
because your reputation, and I had an opportunity, and I forgot to mention this. I was a varsity head coach in Texas last year. Completely slipped my mind, but that was something that I tried to hone on to those kids over there. Was your reputation is like the way to go. Once people get a sniff of what kind of guy you are, I mean, that's all it takes, because that's their pre first impression of you. Because, okay, I've already heard this and this about this guy, so I have to have that mindset. Like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be led to believe that this is something different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So
It's so much in lockstep with what we're discussing just prior to that too. I'm wondering if I can just change gears a little bit and maybe paint a picture for young athletes, because I think this is something when I talk to them that they're missing. They miss this. What is my life like when I'm a student athlete? So I'm wondering if you could kind of maybe walk them through what the day in life of a of a basketball player would be as a student athlete, because it's
Yeah,
not what they think it is.
100%. 100%. I'll give you a breakdown of today's schedule. Our guys today had weights this morning at 7 in the morning, and they had to be there at 6:50, so 6:45, 6:50. Get there. After that, we have a 9 a.m. practice. So going over our offensive schemes and how we need to space and pace, cut, et cetera, et cetera. Now the guys have rest, and we have another 4 p.m. practice today, later this evening. And that's just here at the junior college level. At Baylor, it's a full-time schedule. Like here in our school, in our program, we have to, some guys come in practice late because they have class or whatever the case is, right? And we have a larger number of players on our roster. But if you go to a place like Baylor, for example, just a dream scenario for any kid that wants to play at that level, you're locked in all day. And once you sign those papers, you pretty much belong to the program. Your time is to the program because they're paying for your school, especially at an institution like Baylor, where you're at a private school where tuition is like $60K. So that's pretty much the scholarship, and they got to value it like that, right? And when you, as a player, you're trying to work hard to get there, but the work doesn't stop when you get there. The work gets even harder when you get there. That's what kids need to really understand and embrace, that once they get to a certain point in high school and they know that they're going to play in college and they have coaches calling them, and once they have that opportunity to sign those papers, it gets harder. It gets harder. And I'm not saying that as a negative way. It's just that it's really important to understand and embrace the grind that you're trying to get on when you get to the college level.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because I think that's often misunderstood, that your basketball career in college is like a job. And
Mm-hmm.
you just outlined, hey, an early morning workout, and then weights, and then practice, and then a practice in the afternoon. And most people might be going, well, okay, that's just like two practices and weights, but there's class.
Wow.
You got to go to
Exactly.
class, and you have to study. And some of these classes are not, they're not a cakewalk. So if you're not prepared as a student athlete before you get to college, you're going to have to try to make up that ground as a student athlete in college, and that's hard to do. If you're lacking in chemistry, you're going to have to spend some time with a tutor so you can get good grades in chemistry, and that just all adds to the stress of being a student athlete in itself. And so the point that I want to make, at least for young athletes who may be hearing this, is if like, you have a great opportunity while you're in high school to sort of master these foundational skills: ball handling, dribbling, student athlete. There's a lot of foundational skills to
Mm-hmm.
master. Take the time to master those before you get to college, because you don't want to be trying to make up ground while you're there in an ultra competitive environment already.
For sure. For sure. For sure. Because everyone on the roster, as unfortunate as it is, it's somewhat of a pecking order, especially when you get to the college level, because coach is just going to try to put the five guys on the floor that are going to compete the hardest and going to play the hardest for them. You know what I mean? So, and even if that translates to the basketball court, and it may even translate to the off court things, because a guy may be so talented on the court but can't pass this class, he's not going to be seeing the court because he's suspended because he's failing a class.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So all of those things line up, and I hope the kids that are listening really understand that it's not easy, but the ride to the college level is so much fun. It'll be worth it at the end of the day. If a kid has an opportunity, I don't want to sound like a negative Nancy when I'm saying the work gets so much harder and you got to make sure this, and that. But we're just trying to make sure that you understand that if you're trying to get down that road, it's not easy, but it's so worth it, because the life lessons are just,
Yeah.
what can I say? So,
Yeah, thanks for saying that, because I have a tendency to say, like, this is so hard, just prepare yourself. And I'm not saying that to discourage anyone. I'm saying that to prepare young athletes.
mm-hmm,
It
for
is,
sure.
get yourself ready, because it's serious business. It is a job, and it's serious business. But as you said, it's a lot of fun. The ride is a
Mm,
blast, right?
yes.
It's a really, really worth it. I'm wondering if you might talk about, I like to use the word intangibles a lot. And at a certain level, the ball handlers and shooters, they become a dime a dozen, and the difference makers, the people who are on the court and off the court, are often these intangibles. Like you said, the player who the coach doesn't have to worry about because he's got good grades, and I don't ever have to worry about that. I wonder if you might just talk a little bit about what those intangibles are that you guys look at frequently, whether it be leadership or a good communicator or someone who's always lifting the team up, the oil can
Yeah,
of the team, those sort of intangibles.
for sure. So I think off the court, I think I discussed it earlier. I think being a good person is really important. I think being authentic is really important. And, having an opportunity to put others before yourself in a team environment is important. And I'm just fortunate that we have guys in our program that do those three things off the court, specifically those three things, I'm telling you, I've been part of a program that I couldn't stand being in practice, and I just hated it because no one got along. Nothing is worse when you don't have good people. Guys aren't getting along and they're selfish. Nothing, especially if you're a coach. Those are things that you might as well kiss the season goodbye. You're working with fire. You're not working with anything if the guys aren't bought into each other.
Mm-hmm.
So I can go on and on about that. But on the court, I have three things in mind. I think you need to be extremely aggressive defensively and offensively. Whenever you have an opportunity, you need to be aggressive dribbling the ball to the paint or wherever it is. Just have an aggressive mindset. I think you should be able to shoot the ball at a high level, especially if you want to play Division I, Division II, or if you want to play at the college level. Now I see too many guys that just can't shoot the ball, but they could help the team out so much if, they could just stand at the perimeter and knock that shot down. So I think it's really important, especially in today's game where it's all about space. And, you see guys like Victor Wembanyama, who's 7'5", who can shoot the three ball. You have ball, the lights it up. You have Ball, and I think he plays for the Magic, who's shooting really great right now. He's a 7-footer, and you never used to see that. So I think it's important to shoot the ball really well. I think it's important to play really good defense. A lot of teams completely fold because they don't have any defensive mindset or defensive identity. For example, we play a sort of a man defense, and we have principles that we go about that. And, we try to make sure our guys follow those principles and play defense. But, as a defender, you got to have the mindset to play defense as well. There's a technique that we can coach as coaches, but you got to have to be a dog out there to play defense because, defensively, it's a team thing, right? In the half court setting, when you're playing defense, it's like five guys are on the ball. But if you're in the half court, you could have a two-man game where it's a pick and roll setting or, one-on-one type of thing. But on the defensive side, you have to understand five guys are all defending the ball if you're playing a certain type of defense. If you're playing a man defense or a zone defense, the whole team is defending the basket. So I think that's important. You have to play defense. And the third, you have to have good energy about yourself on the court. The thing that guys don't understand, which was a really hard thing for me to get our high school players to understand, was communication is key on the court and off the court. If I don't know where you are, why are you in practice? I'm making sure that's your teammates' fault. Because if it's one guy's fault, it's everybody's fault, in my opinion. So, communication on the court, like I said, offensively, your point guard has to call out the set. Everyone has to call things out together. And defensively, coach, communication is the foundation of defense. Even if the guy can't really comprehend what you're saying, right? Or maybe the gym is loud or whatever, the noise itself may intimidate the opposing offense. And I'm just being honest with you. If we're having a loud team, if we're having a long team that has their hands up and they're talking on defense, that's a scary sight. So those are my intangibles, and those are my fundamentals on those three things on both sides, on and off the court.
You said something in there that was, it really is something that it's almost every single practice I preach. And it's kind of two things. You mentioned energy, bring energy, and communication. And those two things are tied together I think, pretty closely. And one of the philosophies that I push constantly is the championship gyms are loud gyms. So I wonder if
Hmm.
we could talk a little bit about when you're doing warm-ups, like how loud is that process of people, lighting each other up, cheering each other up, clapping, talking, saying their names, high-fiving, just
Hmm.
that kind of energy and that kind of communication to lift up a level of practice.
That's such a great question, Coach. And I'd say it like this: your energy starts off with your warm up. We're gonna know what type of energy we have based off the warm up we have, and just to test our guys, our record is 0-0, but I'm praising our guys so much today. We had 7 a.m. weights. We had a little breakfast at 8 a.m. 9 a.m. We're back at it. Our guys came out with such energy today. We didn't have any music playing, and that's one thing I try to recommend. If you have an opportunity to have a big speaker out there, the kids love their music. So if we have songs that they like, obviously it's clean. The energy will just automatically be lifted up. Good energy, good vibes, good music playing. Everyone's just clapping, making sure everybody has getting high fives. I think physical touch on that is really an underrated thing in communication. Just giving high fives, making sure guys are touching each other in that manner. I think that's really important. But the beginning of practice is really important to see what kind of energy you guys have. But the real test of a team and the real test of a program is not in the beginning, because everyone's energy is really great in the beginning, everybody, but it's how you do in the middle and especially in the end of practice is where you determine great energy and great communication. Because like I said, the music's playing in the beginning, but it's not going to be playing at the end. We're playing so much basketball. We're playing just live basketball. Guys are tired. It's the fourth quarter. We're tied up. You got to imagine it like that. Fourth quarter, 3 minutes left. Our energy has to be supreme at that moment, because that's the real test of our program right there.
I love it. I love all of that. It goes in lockstep, I think, my philosophy. And what I try to teach young athletes is it costs you nothing to do that. Really, the energy cost is minimal, but what comes out of that is almost exponential, where you're bringing everybody up. So on that same topic, think about middle school athletes, high school athletes, and college athletes. Probably applies to all of them. Maybe you're new to the program, you're a freshman, and you're on the bench, right? It's not your time. Your time is in practice and getting the starters ready, or you're on a travel team and you're maybe the eighth or ninth man on the bench. What can I do as an athlete, or what can young athletes do? I'm putting myself as a young athlete. What can they do in those places to be a difference maker on the team, and in essence, to be into the game even though they're not in the game?
So that's a great question, Coach. And I really believe this: the true character of a player will be shown when he's at his worst, especially on the court. If things aren't going his way, like he's not making shots, I mean, you can just tell by the energy he brings to the court, like, oh, if he's on his knees, is he not saying anything? It just sticks out like a sore thumb. And I think that's really important to understand. Like, you have to have that energy and that presence about yourself when you're on the court in that manner. Am I making sense? I'm on a tangent. Could you repeat that one more time so I can gather my thoughts?
100%. I think that talks. I think you address this idea that there's when you're who you are as a person is really revealed when you're extremely
Yes.
challenged, right?
So
Go ahead.
I didn't mean to cut you off. My thought was I was just going on a tangent. I just kind of forgot. I mean, and this is off the court as well. I mean, your values have to be firm in all aspects, and you're not going to have great days all the time. Like, we had a great day today. We're not going to have it's not going to be like that every day. We're going to have bad days. We're going to have okay days, but it's important that you continue to remember why you're there and embrace the grind, because I'll tell you what, you need to be ready, and don't like when your opportunity comes, you need to be ready, because in basketball, anything can happen. Injuries are a real thing. And a player could go down and your number can be called up, and coaches have to rely on you because he doesn't have a choice. And that's when you step up and be like, okay, here's my time.
Yeah, I love it. Be ready. I got to make a note about that because I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. The second part of that question is to the kids or the players who are at the end of the bench, right? They're not maybe they're like eighth or ninth in line. Like, how can I contribute, or how can they contribute to the team if they're not in the game?
Another great question. That's where you got to see what type of person they are, because they are just they're I don't want to say bottom of the barrel, but on the depth chart, coach is looking at other players to play versus you, right? And that's where you have to be a great teammate right then and there, because anybody can be a great teammate when they're playing, when things are going their way. Because I know for a fact I've seen the best players, they have great days and we're winning. And when the coach subs them out, they're giving everybody high fives. They're giving that guy at the eighth and ninth bench who's getting finally playing time because the game's up. We're up 40. He's finally getting some playing time. But when that player isn't having a good day, who's in the starting five, you can just see, like I've seen it so many times, his character is off. But that guy on the ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th spot on the roster, your job from the coach's perspective has to bring energy from the bench. You have to be a good teammate and cheer those guys on. As much as it is an ego thing to say, like, hey, I'm a cheerleader on the bench, on the 12th guy on the roster, you have to embrace your role and keep grinding. Off the court, when we're not playing live games, you can have the opportunity to get shots up, work on your ball handling, get coach to the side and be like, hey, coach, what can I do offensively to help us out, or defensively for that fact? And I can go on and on, but that guy on the bottom of the totem pole, the guy who's not getting those minutes, it's important and impeccable for him to bring supreme, loud energy on that bench, because, sometimes when you're on the road and you don't have any fans, the bench is the only thing bringing energy to the team that's playing.
Yeah.
So it's like a big circle, man. Like, if one thing isn't working and if one thing isn't working out for our team or our program right now, you can just tell. Like, we're gonna need the energy from our bench guys for our guys on the court. So, and it's vice versa. And our guys have to perform on the court based off the energy those guys are given.
Yeah.
So it has to be a balance of both. And
Yeah.
I think it's important that those guys really embrace that role and continue to hone on that.
Yeah. Great point. And to the, I think maybe the casual observer, watch a game where the bench is on fire. Watch a game where the players at the end of that roster are up off the bench when a shot or a play or a good defensive play or someone takes a charge. They're waving towels, they're cheering. They're difference makers. You might not be in the game, but you can be into the game, and being into the game and being a difference maker at the end of that bench changes the dynamics of the game, because you're lifting your teammates up. You're cheering them on, especially when you're in one of those places where you don't have a single fan in the joint, right? Like,
Exactly.
that is it. Your fan base and your energy, a part of it's coming from those group of people.
For sure.
You said something earlier too, that it's this idea of being ready or being prepared, and you just never know, right? Like, get yourself and your mind and your body ready for the moment the coach calls your name, because it can happen. You don't have to look far. Just look at the NFL the first couple of weeks here. How many quarterbacks are playing that weren't the primary quarterback because someone's injured? How many linemen are playing because they were just, but they're ready. So if
Right.
you're ready to go, you're ready to go. And I want you to maybe talk about two things. There's two things that I mention quite frequently about getting playing time. And you have to be ready. But the two things I want you to maybe talk about are this idea of building the trust of the coach and not being a liability. Like, those are as a coach, I'm asking my players to always build my trust. Like, do things in practice, do the things. So when it comes time for me to look down the bench because I have an injury, it's really an easy decision. Oh, Joey's ready. Oh, she's good to go. I know she won't turn the ball, or she's not going to be a liability, and she's ready. she's prepared. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, like building the trust of the coach and how important that is to young athletes, and then this notion of not being a liability to the coach.
Hmm. I think it's really important to build trust, especially coach to player. But I believe so much. A lot of times, coaches. I mean, coaches have to trust the players, but the players also have to trust the coaches as well. And I've just seen so many times that um, this is just maybe at the collegiate level, that a coach may do something that a player, like they might have had a previous conversation and the coach's decision was different from what they said earlier, if that makes sense, right? So there's a trust thing right there. So what I'm trying to say is it's kind of a both. It's both.
100%.
That's really important. But if we're talking about just from the players aspect, I think it's really important to be consistent with what you do. So, for example, the coach is going to see what you do on a consistent day-to-day basis, whether that's if you mess up or whether that's you do good, whether it's your good teammate, et cetera, et cetera. Like anybody can see what a player is doing, and especially the coach because it's his team. To do that, though, to build positive consistency with a coach, you have to just continue to get better and work on your craft, and the coach will acknowledge that at the end of the day. So, for example, if a guy can't shoot the ball, right, and you know that he's been working on it and you know that he's growing in confidence, then that coach should be like, you should go out there and continue to shoot the ball. And when you have that opportunity to shoot the ball because you've been working on it and I've seen how hard you've been working at it. So consistency is really important to build a trust with a coach, because a player can do one thing one time and be like, look, like that's a great way to make a first impression. But it's important to continue to do those things over and over again so the coach can trust you to play you in crunch minutes.
Yeah, you said something that I haven't asked of guests before, and I'm wondering if we could kind of walk down this road a little bit. And it's this idea of the trust being both ways. And what I'm not really great at doing is asking questions about coaches, like from your perspective and where you are and where you've been and what you've seen as a student athlete and as a coach yourself. What maybe one or two tips for coaches, youth coaches, like what can they be doing to help out athletes? Because I don't address that enough. And I think about it a lot because I see not great coaching. I see it, and I see those things. You just said it, like a coach will say something, but then they do something else, and that destroys the trust from player to coach.
So a player doesn't care how much you know until a player knows how much you care about him.
Say that
I
again.
mean, a player doesn't know how much a player doesn't care how much you know until he knows how much you care about him.
Awesome.
And Coach John Jacobs, who's about to be a Division I high major head coach, he's a Baylor associate head coach right now. He always prioritizes relationships over everything in basketball. And he's one of the best minds in basketball that I've ever been around or I've ever talked basketball with. He's done it overseas. He's done it at a high level. He's won 2 national championships. And I've seen it so many times where coaches prioritize the X's and O's and have somewhat of a transactional relationship with their player, in a sense of they're not worried about what they have going on off the court. They're more worried about how they're producing things for on the court. And, as a coach, especially at the youth level, nothing else should override the experience the player is having on the court, especially at the youth level. Like, it's important for the players to learn what it takes to get to the college level. But when you're at the youth level, the fun of the game, the enjoyment of the game will never be the same once you get to college and the pro level. Because guys have agendas when you get to that level. And when you're at the youth level, you must always just keep in touch with your players off the court and make sure that it's fun for them as well. Because that's one thing that I learned early on, that I just came straight from upstate, and I was just at Vanguard College Prep High School, right? And upstate is I mean, Coach Dave Dickerson's all about X's and O's and wants the best out of his players. And I'm not saying he was not looking for, like, I'm not saying that he wasn't caring about his players. I'm not saying that, but he was all about the X's and O's. And that's how I brought my mindset to the high school. And I kind of got distracted of the joy of the game and how important it is for these kids to have fun out there, because I can be yelling at them, but they might not learn anything because they're not having fun because of things maybe going on off the court. So you see the correlation between all that as well. So it's important for youth coaches to make sure that the players have fun when they come to you. They don't want to be like, oh, here comes Coach so-and-so. This is about to be a miserable practice. Or before they even come, they're thinking this is going to suck because Coach is so-and-so, so-and-so. And, it's important for our coaches to have relationship, and I mean authentic relationships off the court as well, because I love those kids that I coached at high school with last year. I mean, we had a few seniors that I try to stay in touch with, but the guys that are still over there in the high school level, I really genuinely try to have a good relationship with those guys just to make sure that they're okay and making sure that they, how's your classes? How's so-and-so doing? Or have you talked to that girl yet that you had a crush on for so long in class? Have you talked to her? How's that going? Little things that you can go so deep with the player. The players will appreciate that so much more. And, I'm going to continue to remember that, not in my youth coaching days, but I'm going to try to embrace that as far as I go, whether it's professional or in college, because it's relationships over everything at the end of the day. And that translates to all aspects of life.
If you were thinking about the types of things you can do as a youth coach outside of practice, or things to make it fun, like what are some of those things that you would do?
Oh man, I would definitely encourage team dinners. Team eating food with somebody is always a great way to get to know them. Like for example, we had Wild Wing Cafe, and I think there was an NFL playoff game going on or something. And we had a team dinner in high school in Waco, Texas last year. And the kids were teaching me about metaverse and the Facebook and all that stuff that's going on right now. And I'm like, these kids are literally 16, 17 years old. And I'm like, no idea what this is. So I definitely learned something about them on that note. But these kids are brilliant kids anyway. I'm getting distracted from the point. Team dinners is amazing. Just team events, going outside, just doing things together off the court creates good chemistry. I've seen that happen so many times, and I think it's really, really important, like, to have an opportunity for players off the court to be vulnerable about themselves. Like character sessions, like open mic sessions about what kind of person they are, what kind of things they like off the court, and especially diving down deep in a personal level of some things that they've gone through as kids, some things that they have gone through in their short life, what they've gone through to overcome and how they've overcome it, because everyone in the world likes a triumphant story. And if you have an opportunity to be vulnerable, especially as a coach and as a player, and have an opportunity to have that setting, it's really important, because that creates chemistry in all aspects.
Sorry, I lost my feed there for a second.
You're good.
Another question for you: that whole off the court. This is just it's a tremendous thought, because I haven't asked it enough. If you're thinking about planning your year or planning your season out, what would be a tempo that you would want to do something like that? So, like, is that something you would do once a week? Something you think is important to do every other week? And maybe the comparison isn't how often it's a week, but maybe how many times you do that per game, like 5 games and we do something else, or it's just something that you build into the weekly routine. Like we do when I was in high school, we did a Friday night dinner every single Friday. It was a team dinner. When I was in basketball, that particular coach had us we did all kinds of like games where we competed against one another, like track and field types of things, but it got us off the basketball court and got us doing something different. And it's something that I'm planning into my season this year that I haven't been really good at doing in the past. So
yeah. So
talk about the tempo, like how is there a good, from your perspective, a good frequency of doing that?
yeah, and I think it's important at the high level. When the budget is so big, like at places like Baylor, they can go to Top Golf like every other week and go get team dinners whenever they want. If you're at the youth level, mid-major, college, high school, whatever, I mean, I think once a month dinners, team dinners at the evening, maybe on like a Friday night, is really important. Like, I think it's especially if it's going into the weekend, maybe they might want to do something after the dinner that further creates better relationships with those guys. But as many times as you can, coach, as many times as you can to have that opportunity to get together with those guys, it's just special because you're not going to have those type of moments all the time. Like I would love to go back to Waco and have dinner with those high school guys just to catch up and see what they're doing, just from my perspective, right? But I mean, for the players, I mean, it's important for them to get to know each other as much as possible. Whether that's at the cafeteria where it's, hey, we have team breakfast at 9 a.m. Everybody needs to be there after practice. Whether that's whatever. I mean, there's so many different things. But it's important, regardless of what you do, it's important that the guys are together and they're having fun and they're having good conversations.
Man, that's really powerful. And again, probably the first time I've really had that discussion on the podcast. And I think it's just really, really needed. I'm wondering if you would pivot just a little bit, but it's really kind of related to that topic. And it's this idea of setting the team culture. Is there in your experience when you've done this or teams have done this, has it been intentional? Like how have you guys gone about establishing the culture at the beginning of the year? I know some programs will sit down with their players and will go through like foundational values that they have. What's maybe a couple of pointers you have in terms of setting the team culture and certainly having those off court meetings and get-togethers is important.
For sure. Oh, sorry. I'm just trying to adjust my camera. Man, the number one thing to establish a culture, in my opinion, is to have good guys. And that's just at the beginning of the podcast what we were talking about. If you don't have guys that are good, like decent guys, because I've seen the worst of the worst, coach, I'm telling you, and you can't build a program around those type of players. I'm just being honest with you. Yeah. It is an absolute cancerous decision to bring those type of players. And just because they're good doesn't mean it's going to be good for your program. I promise you that. I've seen coaches bring in guys that are so talented, but they're not good guys on and off the court. It completely crushes their season and completely crushes their culture. It completely crushes their program. I'm telling you, I've seen it too many times. So I think it's important to establish that you have a good rapport with your players, but understand that they are good players first and foremost. And then you establish what you're trying to look for within the program. So like last year as a high school coach, I made sure that all of our players were givers on and off the court. I made sure our second value was being authentic on and off the court, because I do not have a problem with who you are as an authentic, genuine human being, and I'll meet you halfway, because I'm not going to judge you for who you are and who you aren't. And, I think those two things are extremely important. You got to have good guys. You got to have givers first. You got to have authentic people. And then you build off of what you're trying to establish as a coach, because those type of people, those type of players will buy into what you're trying to sell or what you're trying to bring to the culture of the program.
Dang, that's super powerful. And I'm going to kind of paraphrase, but maybe you could correct me if I have it wrong. You said something like, this is super powerful. Just because they're good players don't mean they're good for your program. Did I get that right?
Yes, sir. And I will continue to remember that until I'm stopped coaching. I have seen so many times, coach, that, like, for example, I was a part of a program where we had a great coaching staff, right? I'm talking about coaches from different places that have so much knowledge of the game. They understand that culture and having that is really important to have a successful program. But the problem is they didn't know that they they didn't know that they had these type of players coming in. They just got them because they were okay. And I'm not faulting these coaches because everybody makes mistakes. And, obviously they've learned and now they're in a way better trajectory than they used to be. But they brought in players that just were horrible for the program and the culture. I mean, you cannot do that. That's a number one thing that you can't compromise is talent over culture. You just can't. Like, you can't bring in a guy that's anti what you're trying to establish as a coach and as a program, the values of what you're trying to establish. Like, this kid can, like, he's a 20 points a game scorer, but in the locker room, not a soul likes him, and none of the coaches like working with him. You're talking about an absolute problem. You can't get nothing done. You can't be successful. So I can go on and on about that.
You can't win with 20 points.
I mean, exactly. And, here's how I look at it, Coach. If the guy is acting one way on the court, he's going to act the exact same way off the court because basketball is something you love, and the way and how you act on the court, I mean, those decisions will be reflected on how you act off the court as well. If you're going to put in, and I can go on off the court to on the court reflection. If a guy is so tedious about his studies and he loves the game, he's going to come in after hours to put in extra work and get extra shots up. You just know it. Right? So those things have a great correlation as well. But I can go on and on about that because I've just seen it so many times. And I'm just so thankful that Coach Johnson here at SMC and Spartanburg Methodist College has done a great job of bringing great players, right, on the court, but he has brought great players off the court as well.
Yeah.
And it's not even your first starting five. It's your players on the bench too that are embracing their roles and are still bought into the program. And, it's not hard to find. I promise you that. You just have to find those type of guys to continue to search. So I can go on and on about that, Coach. But
that's super powerful and so important because if I extrapolate that from college into youth programs, whether it be high school or AAU or something of that nature, there's such a toxic push to stack teams with just scorers. And then you go out and win these games because if everyone scores 20 points and I get 60, I probably have a chance in an AAU game where it's really fast-paced. Will win, but it's just destroying the culture that's inside there, and it's also reinforcing that behavior is okay, whatever it is. And I've seen just crazy behavior from young athletes.
And I don't want to cut you off, but I mean you just nailed it on the head. I mean once a coach lets it slide, and the player knows that he has that advantage over the coach, it's over with. It's over with because then you're trying to chase the player. And that's a dead road right there, brother. Like, cause he's gonna, especially if he's talented. Like, if he's talented and a coach gives him that leverage to just do what he wants, it's over with. Because a good player understands, his role. Even however great he is, a great player knows that an individual can't win championships. Everyone has to be bought in. Michael Jordan. His turning point was when he understood that he has to get his teammates involved to win at a high level. Kobe Bryant, LeBron James. I mean, Kevin Durant went to the Warriors. He knew that he had to have other pieces. You as an individual will never accomplish more than you can as a team. I'm just being honest. And the more team success you have, it leads to more individual success. And that's what a lot of these guys need to understand and embrace and realize.
Man, so powerful. So powerful. I'm going to make a comment here. I wonder if you would just kind of talk about what's on your mind. I'll go through a couple of these. The process of winning.
Day to day. That's me and Coach talked about this literally yesterday. You're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days, but it's when you show up consistently, put the work, that's when results will come. Because it's not going to come tomorrow. It's going to come from the months down the road when you're in March playing for the championship in the Region 10. So it's just putting in work every day. It's a consistency thing.
Okay. Here's another one. Comparing yourself to others.
Horrible. Don't do it. It's the thief of joy. as they say, comparison is the thief of joy. I think that's in scripture, but
It is in several places.
yeah, and if it's there several places, then God's telling you to don't do it. But comparison, man, is the absolute worst, and that goes for coaches as well. So don't do it. Embrace what you are right now in the moment, because God is working with you in the moment. He's not working. He knows you in your past. He knows you in your future. He knows what that's about. If you want to get better, look where your feet are, embrace where your feet are, and continue to do that.
Outstanding. Fitting into the program.
Man, I don't know if I have a few words for that, but I'll just say this: every player wants to be a part of a team. Whether you're good or bad, everyone wants to just fit in. Everyone wants to have good relationships. Everyone wants that. And I think that's important and getting to fit in is being yourself, being authentic on and off the court, coach. And I cannot hone that enough, because you will find the people that you attract by being yourself. You're not going to find the people that you like by being something else. And that goes for on and off the court. So in one word, I'll say authenticity will lead to your fit on the team. Being yourself. And I pray that the young kids that are listening, with social media being so big, with TikTok being an endless stream of garbage, comparison will kill your joy for whatever you love, and don't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to tell my athletes, like, there's like 14,000 minutes or something in a day, right? But basically 1% of your day is 14.4 minutes. And if you just focus on being 1% better each day, if you're just investing 14.4 minutes, compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to anyone else. Just compare yourself to who you were yesterday and focus on that 1% better. Of course,
Yeah,
would love you to do like 50%, but
exactly. Hey, as coaches, we want that, but it's just not the case.
right. Here's an interesting one that I haven't talked about before that I'm 100% sure you're well versed in, and this is idea of jumping ship, jumping teams. Now, this is something you see more common in collegiate basketball, where athletes are coming in. If they don't like something, they don't like the work, they don't like the grind, they'll just jump ship.
Yeah, well, in high level basketball, the NIL gives kids an opportunity to go make money somewhere else. So, hey, you guys aren't paying me enough. I'm way more talented than what you guys are paying me. I'm jumping ship, right? And, I understand that. And if NIL wasn't a thing, then I would kind of be like, it's always questionable, right? Anytime you're evaluating a player and it says that this guy has been to like 2-3 different schools, it's always a red flag for some reason, regardless of what it is. Something's going on, right? And, you got to just get to know that player and see what's going on. But jumping ship, to get back to your question, I've never been a fan of it. I think like Damian Lillard said at the Portland Trail Blazers, you chumps are just running from the grind. And like, that's what I think he was referring to Paul George when he was talking to OKC. And that's the absolute truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jordan didn't win his first ring. I think it was until like 8 or 9 years after he was in the league. Same with LeBron. And now those two guys are known as the greats. So I think it's really important to stay where your feet are, be where your feet are, and just continue to enjoy the grind, because that's where the fun of basketball comes, the grind.
So we're coming to the end of some questions here, and I didn't want this opportunity to go by without asking you about the mental side of basketball. Are you guys at your level teaching mental performance skills, or do you have anything in place formalized where that becomes part of the routine for athletes?
So we have Spartanburg Methodist College is a great college so our setup is a little bit different, where we compete at the junior college level for 2 years, but we are a 4-year institution, right? Does that make sense? So we have opportunity for funding that a lot of other junior college programs don't have. And so we have counseling offered for our players. Mental health is an extremely, extremely important piece of basketball on and off the court. And, having your mind sharp is always important. So we have sessions for our guys to get counseling, to get therapy in that regard. So, and I think it's always important for our coaches to understand that, we need to embrace that as the leaders of the program, just to always check in on our guys, because, we love the basketball part of it, but it's always important to understand that, hey, we do this basketball thing, but, we're just trying to, at the end of the day, we're humans. And if there's something on your mind that's really troubling you, you have all the right to say what's going on. So mental health is an extremely important part of just life in general.
Outstanding. Now, the question I always ask at the end is there anything that I haven't asked you that you want to share with young athletes or budding college athletes that you're like, hey, you should know this before you get here, before you start the process, before you start looking?
Well, I'll say this, Coach, and I'm going to continue to say this to my young kids, the young guys that are listening, the young guys and girls that are listening, watching this game and listening to this podcast and want to be successful, is be yourself. Be authentic. Because, God has his plan already set out for you, but it may not be basketball. And I hate to say it, but if you want to get to that level and it's not helping you be yourself and be the best version, maybe it's something else that God's telling you to do. And I'm not discouraging kids at all. I'm not, because let me tell you something. Nobody wanted to play college basketball more than me. No one in the world, no one in the entire planet wanted to play that at that level. But I had to face the hard reality that I can't be as good as Zion Williamson. You know what I mean? I grew up when Zion was in Spartanburg Day School, and I'm like, this guy's jumping from the free throw line, dunking the ball in a regular game. Yet I can barely consistently shoot from the three. And so being yourself, being my authentic self has allowed me to find my route and my voice in coaching, because I love it so much. Yeah. And I love the players so much. The reason why I do this coaching thing is for the players. I want to honor God in every way I can, but my main joy comes from working with players. I love working with players. And the best players and the most fun I have with those type of players are the authentic ones. Those guys that I know I'm going to get along with because they're true to themselves, they're true to this game, and they're true to this program and what we're trying to do here. And so to all the guys and girls listening, regardless of who's doubting you, regardless of who doesn't like your shoes or your clothes that you wear, regardless of what this person or that person doesn't like, or what music you don't like, whatever, embrace who you are and embrace your authenticity, because nobody can take that away from you. Because a lot of people, when you're young, run from who they really are. And that's always a scary thing, because it can trickle down to when you become an adult, because you didn't take the time to become yourself as a young person. So I think it's always really important to embrace what you love to do as a young person and be yourself, regardless of what people are telling you.
Well said. And super powerful. I think for any young athlete hearing that, just take that to heart, both from the perspective of who you are, or I like to ask the question, who are you and who's you?
Yeah.
There's nothing more I should say. I mean, that was super powerful. So without diluting that any, I want to say thank you so much for being on the podcast. I look forward to having you back on some specific topics
for sure
as we go on, and I'm gonna stay in touch with you throughout the season to see how things are going, and I want to make sure we follow.
Yeah, no problem at all. And if any other coaches have any questions, please just feel free. I'll even just drop my number if that's cool with you. A lot of coaches at coaches clinics used to do that. 864-804-1142. Shoot me a text about anything that you guys have, any questions about the game. I love basketball, and I love to just talk about it.
Yeah, take advantage of that, especially for coaches. We hit on some things that I don't typically talk about in terms of coaches, and it's definitely a growth area for this podcast, is to provide some insight for coaches. So thanks again. Good luck this season.
All right, appreciate you.
This is the Foxhole Podcast.